House Bill 2371 by Carter and others relative to annexation. Madam Speaker, members, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Carter, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2464, please.
Representative Carter moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2464, properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Carter.
Madam Speaker, I move passage of Senate Bill 2464 on third and final reading.
Representative Carter moves passage of Senate Bill 2464 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call for First Amendment.
House Finance Committee Amendment 1 spread on the member's desk. Madam Speaker, members, it's the same as Senate Amendment 2.
Chairman Sargent, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment.
House Finance Committee Amendment 2 spread on the member's desk. Madam Speaker, members, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1 to 2.
Chairman Sargent, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment number 2 withdrawn. Next amendment.
No further amendments, Madam Speaker.
Representative Carter, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Carter renews his motion. Discussion on the bill. Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
I'd just like to say that when Representative Carter brought this bill in the beginning, a lot of people told him that it was just laughable, that it couldn't be done, that it's never been done in decades, and that a certain group just wouldn't let it happen. And I think he's proved that things have changed around here and has brought some legislation that's going to put some power in the hands of the people. And we just appreciate all the hard work you put into it, Mr. Sponsor.
Representative Lauer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
I do.
As we discussed earlier, I would like to get some clarity on one of the part of the annexation where individuals or groups can petition a city. This does not impact the people's ability to petition to become a part of an annexed area. Am I correct?
It does not affect it. In fact, it restates and makes it even clearer that the right to come into the city by agreement or consent is reinforced.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Appreciate all the work you did on this.
Representative Odom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members of the House. Let me echo the words of the Majority Leader on the good work you've done, Representative. We've actually voted on a couple of annexation bills, and I refresh my memory on this one. Does this one exempt the metropolitan forms of government?
It does. In Section 5, all 3 counties governed by metropolitan forms of governments are exempted from this bill.
That's how I recalled it, but for the record, we had a couple of members ask about that.
Yes.
And,
we took care of you like we said we would.
And congratulations on a great deal of work all the way from Tasser, from here to Tasser and then back. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
I yield.
As you know, my concerns are usually about what impacts Memphis and the other metros in Shelby County.
Yes, sir.
How will your bill impact the agreements, the annexation agreements, the reserve areas between the cities in Shelby County?
Shelby County has a group of agreements called reserve agreements, wherein prior to 1101, they entered into agreements setting aside what could be annexed by what city. Upon passage of 1101, those contracts were adopted as the urban growth plan. This bill has no effect whatsoever on the territories established in that bill.
Thank you. Those agreements remain intact.
They remain fully in force.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Sparks.
Yes, will the sponsor yield?
I yield.
Yes, last year when we spoke about this, I had a stack of papers from constituents across the state of Tennessee, from Mountain City to Memphis, and it had to have been three inches thick. Unfortunately, none of the complaints were from my district. You know, my town council planning committee has done a good job with our annexations. But going back to what Representative from Memphis said, I can't just represent Smyrna, Rutherford County. We've got to worry about Bristol, Tullahoma, and even Mountain City. But can you explain how the commercial, if we've got a main road like we have in my community, Jefferson Pike, state's in the process of widening it now, been countless deaths over there the past 20 years. Explain how that can come in as far as commercial. If we have another Amazon fulfillment center, a Nissan supplier wanting to come in, bring in jobs to the community, the homeowners want to come in, the landowner wants to come in. Explain how your bill doesn't impede economic development.
Yeah, this bill restates that by consent or petition of the people, that is reinforced and made more important than ever before. We have no intention of keeping anyone out of cities, particularly businesses that want to be in. Now, there is a sideline to that. A part of this bill sends questions of annexation not determined by current law back to TASER, and TASER will have the task of determining if foreign corporations, local corporations, Tennessee corporations not residing in the area get to vote. So there are issues that are very validly back before TASER to be determined. But to the citizens, to the farmers, and to all people who want to come into the city, this bill meets their needs head on and provides for economic development through consent.
Yes. Representative Carter, could you also explain about how you've seen abuses, may not be in my county of Rutherford, but in other counties of the state? Can you elaborate on some of the abuses out there?
Well, I think there are too many to mention, and I think probably everyone in here has an abuse. One of the things that TASER is going to study is de-annexation. And in TASER, we were presented with a situation where a particular city annexed out several miles out a road to get to a very popular subdivision. There was a small bridge in the way. That bridge was condemned by the state of Tennessee, and that city responded by marking off 1 foot around the bridge and de-annexing it and causing that failure and that default, that condemnation of the bridge to fall back on the county from which it was taken. I assume that that issue, at least if I have a say, will also be considered at TASER. That's the most egregious situation that I heard.
Yes, and maybe Representative Van Husk can elaborate on this. What about the plan of services that these municipalities, what holds them to putting in these plans of services that these taxpayers are basically footing the bill, but they're not getting the plan of services? Can y'all elaborate on that?
This bill does not address plan of services. That is referred to TASER to be studied. It was discovered briefly, and I don't want to speak for anyone else, but the mayor that sat next to me said that we need to put specific dates for the performance of those conditions. I think that'll be the minimum, the starting point. I think there will be very definite regulation concerning the plan of services, the use of tax money during the development of those services, and when those services are provided, I think will be guaranteed under the new bill that will come next year, yes, not involving the right to vote. The right to vote is not going to TASER. That's being determined by this body here today, as it was determined last week in the Senate.
Are there areas of the state where people have been annexed, paying taxes, and not getting those services or paying for?
More than I can list.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
I yield.
Body, I want to just share something with you. Representative Carter and Representative Van Huss have done a phenomenal job with this. And just give it some context, if I could, real quick. There was a nonpartisan citizens group that has rated Tennessee the 4th worst in property rights among the 50 states. We score a D-. And one of the biggest reasons why is because of our eminent domain and our annexation laws. And I just want you to know that what these two gentlemen have done is a Herculean effort to make sure that Tennesseans get to recover some of the property rights that have been taken from them over the years. And along with these two gentlemen and Mr. Bill Hopt up in the gallery, we owe them a great debt of gratitude, because the 4th Amendment of our Constitution clearly says that we should be safe in our persons and our property. And these two gentlemen are restoring that. So, gentlemen, thank you very much, and I hope everybody on this floor votes in the affirmative. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative McDaniel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative, you mentioned about reinforcing the right for people to petition to be annexed. What if everyone in that area hasn't signed that petition? Can you describe the process then?
Well, I think what this bill does is it actually goes a little beyond that, Representative McDaniel. It says that anyone that consents can come into the city. And one of the provisions of the bill provides that if people say they want to come into the city under the prior law had to still have a referendum. This bill eliminates that. If you consent, you can come in. The city need not take the time, trouble, and expense to hold a referendum. So the city could take those, say there's 50 homes, they could take 35 by consent and not take the other. If they hold a referendum and it passes 35 to 15, then everyone is in.
Okay, where there's not a referendum held, this is where I'm not understanding.
Yes, then it would be by consent.
Well, you have a group of homes, you're going to leave a donut in the middle where people who don't want to be annexed would be left out of the city? If
after the passage, the city will have two methods of bringing people in, by consent or having a referendum. Now, if 51% or 50.01% of those in the referendum vote to come in, everyone comes in. It's a democracy.
But if there's not a referendum, that's where...
If there's not a referendum as it is currently drawn, you will be stuck to those that consent to enter the city. In other words, those who want to come in cannot influence those who do not want to come in absent referendum, if that explains it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sponsor yield.
Yes.
Representative Carter, how will this affect future metro forms of government?
It will have no effect. That is a decision under a different statute. And remember, for my friends from the metropolitan forms of government, a metropolitan form of government can only be formed by referendum. So in that situation, the people have the right to vote to decide to go in. There's nothing wrong with that. We do not affect that in any way.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was at one point going to call for the previous questions, but the conversations you were having with Representative McDaniels, the example of one way that you could be annexed is by consent.
Yeah.
And if an example, you got 50 homes, I think you used that, and if 25 wanted to come in and 25 did not want to come in, then the 25 that wanted to come in would be annexed. Correct.
If that's their decision, they can come in, yes.
Now, from the standpoint of that hypothetical, how would services be provided to the 25 that consented versus the 25 that didn't consent?
Exactly the same way they're being provided now by the hodgepodge of annexation we have throughout the state. Those in the city would receive services, perhaps. Many do not now, but they would be marked for services. Those that are not would not.
Those that they would not receive services, those that did not consent.
If they're not in the city, they won't receive services. And if you look at the annexation maps across the state, they can find them now. They can find them after.
I'm in support of the legislation, but I'm just trying to understand services and taxes.
Well,
in other words, those individuals that consent more than likely will have to pay some type of additional taxes.
Absolutely.
Those that did not consent are currently paying taxes to someone for services,
yep.
Fire, police,
yes.
et cetera, et cetera.
Their taxes and their services would remain as is and probably come from the county. Those who agree to go in the city will pay a higher tax but receive a higher set of services from the city.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Thank
Representative Faison.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a neat thing that we have going on, especially this year. Depending on what side of the bill you're on, you argue about local control as opposed to state government control. And local government, there's this constant bantering going back and forth. And even on the House floor, we've heard about local control today and local government control. But the wonderful thing about this bill is this has nothing to do with state control or local government control. This has everything to do with people control. And that's what made our country great. I'm glad that both these representatives brought this bill here. This is about allowing the people to speak what's best for their life. And that's the safest place for us to be as legislators, allowing them to speak for what's best for their life. Good job, guys.
Representative Mike Turner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's already been clear about the metropolitan form of government. We're not affected by this, and this is
that's true.
Which side? Well, I rarely ever blue light up here, but the only time I do blue lights when I don't have a dog in the fight. So I'll be blue lighting this bill. Thank you.
Representative Johnny Turner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Yes, ma'am.
just one, your bill sounds great, but in response to the question asked earlier, you gave the example of 50 residents. And if 30, let's go back to the 25. If 25 residents voted for annexation, well, let's make it 30, voted for annexation, then those 30 would then become annexed to the city. The 20 would not.
No,
You've
ma'am.
That's
I'm
not
sorry,
what you
I
said.
confused you. My apologies. If there is a referendum, a simple...
But this is without the referendum.
If there is not a referendum, then it is only by consent. And if it's a subdivision of 50 and 25 or 23 consent, those 23 will go into the city if the city accepts them. The only way you can affect the votes of all is to have a referendum. If not, it's by consent.
I understand that. But suppose I live on the west side of town and I didn't vote for it. Someone else lives in the middle part of the town and they didn't vote for it. Someone else lives in the east part of that subdivision and they didn't vote for it. So are you going to skip houses? That's what I'm trying to see. How will you, if it was a group where 30 were all together and 20 were all together, I could see. But at this point, how would those, my neighbor has voted, wants to be annexed. I don't. I'm next door. The next door neighbor wants to be annexed. The next door neighbor doesn't. How do you deal with that? It sounds like a maze, to me.
Yes, ma'am, I do, and that's exactly what would result. That is what has occurred now. That's what we're trying to correct. But remember this, it's up to the city to accept your petition or not. And when it would be too difficult to determine who is in and who is out, I assume the city would refuse to accept those petitions. Remember, you petition, you agree to come into the city then must agree to bring you in.
I see. Thank you.
It would stop that.
Representative Pody.
Move previous question.
Previous question has been called for. Is there objection? Seeing none, all those in favor, Senate Bill 2464, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 85, for nay, 5 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 2464, having received a constitutional majority, hereby declared passed. Without objection, motion to reconsider is tabled. Representative Carter?
Madam Speaker, may I take a moment for personal privilege, please?
You're recognized.
To the 61 co-sponsors of this bill and to the 85 of you who just voted and even to those of you who chose not to, I want to say that the overwhelming support you provided to 590, Representative Van Huss, paved the way for the Senate. Present here today, Senator Rusty Crowe and Senator Bo Watson. It plowed the way. It created an atmosphere for the amendments to this bill, which made the bill much better than I drafted it. I think it is important for you to understand that and for me to say on behalf of Representative Van Huss, Senator Crowe, Senator Watson, Senator Norris, and myself, thank you. But the most important people I would like to thank today are the citizens of the state of Tennessee. This has been a true citizens' movement. There have been no lobbyists, special interest, or big money involved in this movement. The citizens spoke, and their representatives and their senators worked in an unprecedented manner in cooperation with Representative Van Huss, Senator Crowe, Senator Watson, and Senator Norris. This bill was born. Is it not amazing what we can do as a government of the people and by the people when we act with the will of the people? Let today's action stand as testimony to everyone in Tennessee and, more importantly, to the people of America that government can work, government in Tennessee does work when the politicians put self-aggrandizement and award upon themselves to the side and reflect the will of the people. It is an honor to serve with you. Thank you.